The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
Tonight on Politics Now, churches win in court. The new COVID regulations for places of worship after a federal court sides with them. Plus,
I will not give this false narrative about my state any more attention than it has already unfortunately received.
Nevada's election continues to be defended by Democrats and attacked by Republicans. The latest congressional hearing on election security and
We agreed we will not leave town until we've made law.
Will we have a deal or won't we? The latest discussion in a constantly changing debate over a COVID relief bill.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Churches can now have up to 25% capacity after a court ruling. Thanks for watching Politics Now. I'm Vanessa Murphy. The change came after a federal court ruling this week. They had been capped at 50 people total, but a church in Lyon County sued, saying that was unconstitutional, and a judge agreed. Orko Manna shows us that while the court ruling is welcomed news for some congregations, many tell us they'll still be playing it safe.
We have lost a lot of people to COVID.
Kelsey West is the senior pastor at Nehemiah Ministries. His church has the proper social distancing and sanitation measures in place, but because coronavirus has directly impacted his congregation, he'll continue to only do virtual services.
We're still able to do the work of the Lord, and I don't have to physically put people in harm's way.
This comes even as churches in Nevada now have new COVID-19 regulations. A federal court overturned an order Tuesday that upheld limited gatherings, saying houses of worship can have 25% of their capacity instead of the 50-person limit put in place by Governor Steve Sisolak. Cantor Jessica Hutchings with Congregation Ner Tamid says they're also fully online. They even stopped parking lot services when the statewide pause was announced last month.
We have a committee of doctors and of board members that make decisions based on what our government is advising and what is safe for our community. So we will be meeting to discuss how and if this changes anything that we're doing right now.
Churchgoers we spoke to say they'll continue to stay home.
I'm afraid of what would happen. I think it's better to do it virtually.
But I just want to be on the safe side. So right now, I don't go to church, basically.
While some look forward to in-person services during the holidays, Pastor West has one simple message.
This season, I just want people to be safe. That's my prayer.
Orko Manna, 8 News Now.
And again, that was Orko Manna reporting. Governor Sisolak said in a statement he was disappointed by the court's decision, but will follow it. He's still urging churches who choose to hold in-person services to be safe by requiring masks and enforcing social distancing. And a new eviction moratorium was also announced this week. It is similar to the CDC version that expires at the end of the month. Joe Moeller tells us that tenants must print out a declaration and make sure their landlord receives it.
I have a 2-year-old and a 9-year-old. And I'm 32 weeks pregnant.
Stephanie Edwards is in the process of going to court over an eviction.
The mediator talked to her and talked to us, and they gave us until next month on the 5th to be out.
She hopes the new moratorium will help her stay in her home.
The only place we can really go is if we do get evicted is California, back to my parents' house.
Sunday, the governor announced a new moratorium that will last through March 31st. Tenants must take action.
The tenants do need to sign a declaration saying that they are eligible for protection under the directive.
This is what the declaration looks like. It needs to be printed and given to the landlord. Morgan Shaw from Nevada Legal Services says if you make less than $99,000 a year, cannot pay rent due to a COVID-related issue, and are at risk of homelessness, you are protected.
There is no point up to lockout that is too late. So even if you end up going to court, you can bring the declaration with you to court.
You should not wait for a notice to take action, and always keep a copy and proof you sent the document.
Make sure that you're still applying for rent assistance if possible, because this directive does not forgive rent that's due. It doesn't stop late fees from accruing.
Joe Mueller, 8 News Now.
We do have a link to that declaration on our website at 8newsnow.com. President Donald Trump continued to criticize Nevada's election this week, including claiming on Twitter that thousands of non-citizens voted in Nevada. Last week, the Nevada Supreme Court unanimously said the Trump campaign failed to show any serious errors or flaws in the election. Our electors voted for President-elect Biden on Monday of this week. Following weeks of election fraud accusations stemming from the president's supporters, the Senate Homeland Security Committee held a hearing to examine those accusations. Raquel Martin from our Washington, D.C. bureau tells us more about what happened.
President-elect Joe Biden.
Even as more Republicans acknowledge Joe Biden as the next president, Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson says he's not ready to sweep this election under the rug.
Fraudulent voting did occur.
At a Senate Homeland Security hearing Wednesday, Johnson insisted human and voting machine errors led to miscounts.
Many of these irregularities raise legitimate concerns, and they do need to be taken seriously.
Attorneys leading the president's re-election fight in Nevada and Wisconsin back Johnson's claims.
2,000 of those ballots in Dane and Milwaukee County had no initials at all.
But Michigan Democratic Senator Gary Peters says the debate is over.
Their statements that have been made have all been rejected by courts of law.
Peters slammed Johnson for advancing what he calls dangerous misinformation.
Gives a platform to conspiracy theories and lies. And it's a destructive exercise that has no place in the United States Senate.
Chris Krebs, the nation's former top election security official, again denied that voting machines were compromised.
I think we're past the point where we need to be having conversations about the outcome of this election.
But Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley disagrees.
President Trump has every right to continue to raise these serious issues.
And Hawley still hasn't ruled out objecting to the election results when they're presented to Congress on January 6th.
Raising concerns about the election is a totally legitimate thing. I'm studying how one might do that, what the procedure is, and trying to gather evidence.
In Washington, Raquel Martin.
Nevada Senator Jackie Rosen is also on that committee and said our election was fair and secure.
Both our Republican Secretary of State and our Democratic Attorney General have stated there is no evidence of widespread voter fraud that occurred in Nevada, and our highest court has said the same, and I will not give this false narrative about my state any more attention than it has already unfortunately received.
The I-Team has looked into allegations of fraud and found 2 cases of a deceased voter having a ballot cast in their name. In all, 5 people voted twice. All of the allegations have been forwarded to the Secretary of State's office. The Clark County School District and the largest teachers union have reached a tentative agreement on reopening schools. The plan allows for the possibility of some students and staff returning to the classroom. 8 News Now reporter Kristen Drummond shows us what to expect if the plan is approved by the Board of Trustees.
The plan right now focuses on the district's youngest students, so those who are in elementary school. CCSD says pre-K through 3rd grade students may possibly return first for face-to-face instruction next year.
Our babies need to be in school. Those are the ones that need the social interaction.
A big step in bringing students back to schools for in-person learning. The district and Clark County Education Association came to a tentative agreement following months of negotiations. The plan outlines certain standards and safety precautions. That includes mandatory COVID-19 testing for educators and providing personal protective equipment. CCEA's executive director calls reopening schools a trial and error process, but this allows for an incremental approach.
Being ready with a plan is absolutely critical, and we think this is a plan that allows flexibility, allows us to address emergent issues that suggest maybe we expand, maybe we contract.
The district will not require students to take a COVID-19 test before coming back on campus. As for the vaccine, the district plans to work with the Southern Nevada Health District to make it a voluntary option for educators. The tentative agreement will be presented at the board meeting January 14th. Trustees will also consider a potential reopening plan on that date. Until then, all staff working remotely will continue to do so. Reporting in Las Vegas, Kristen Drummond, 8 News Now.
Well, since the plan includes mandatory PPE and screening, how will an already underfunded school district pay for it? The plan relies on federal government help.
We absolutely have to have the money in place for the safety component, because that was one of our top priorities, not only for the safety of our staff, but for our students. So making sure that that adult feels as safe as possible and that the students are safe. So without that, we would have to go back to the table.
Employees who can work remotely will continue to do so until January 15th to comply with the governor's stay-at-home 2.0 order. It was report card night, so to speak, for Clark County School Superintendent Dr. Jesus Jara. He had his review during this week's board meeting. Overall, board members say there's room for improvement, but they're ready to do it together.
The superintendent, you're still our leader. We need you. Let's work together and take care of these kids and all of our staff and our community.
I want you to know that I am confident that you and this new board will work together with Dr. Alsbury. You guys will rewrite some of the policies to be grouped a little bit better together, and that in 6 months to a year that things will be in a much better place.
Superintendent Jara responded, saying in part, "I will continue to communicate transparently and directly on all matters affecting our students and schools. This will be even more critical as safely reopening our schools soon becomes a reality." You can read the full statement at 8newsnow.com. COVID relief is still in the works.
When you compromise, obviously, not everyone's going to be 100% happy with the product, but ultimately that's what gets the job done.
Up next, Congresswoman Susie Lee talks about compromise efforts in her caucus. Plus,
I'm Alexandra Limon in Washington. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill say they're close to reaching a deal on a coronavirus relief package, but one Democratic senator says
Team, we have the games.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
Lawmakers say they're on the brink of reaching a deal for another round of COVID relief. The latest version of a coronavirus relief package proposes leaving out both money for state and local governments and COVID-related lawsuit protections for business. But Congress has said they will work through the weekend to try and get it done. Nevada Democratic Congresswoman Susie Lee has been a part of a bipartisan group trying to hammer out that deal. My I-Team colleague David Charnes interviewed her about the bill, and he started by asking about another potential one-time stimulus payment for everyone.
Is $600 enough, and is it something that you would support, and would you support more?
The stimulus package, I think, has been an important part that got added in because Mitch McConnell refuses to include state and local funding in this package. And so basically there's $140 billion that will go in to these stimulus, these stimulus checks. I don't think this package is enough at all. I mean, first of all, remember, our own Federal Reserve Chairman back in May said that we needed to go big. And we started out with a $3 trillion package. It went to $2 trillion, and now we're less than $1 trillion. I believe we will come back to with another package in the next Congress. And so I think this is obviously a stopgap measure. It's something to get relief to people who, especially in Southern Nevada, so many of our families have been struggling and businesses are on the verge of collapse. And so this couldn't come at a more critical time.
On top of getting that stimulus out, we're also once again talking about funding the government. No one wants a government shutdown. Why are we continuously having these debates in Washington? And it always seems to happen right in the middle of Christmas time, beginning of the new year, when people want to know that they're going to have a job. So why is this happening yet again, and how can we prevent it from continuing to happen?
David, when I first came to Congress, I was really struck. I ran on basically a commitment to try to be bipartisan, to work with my Republican colleagues. And I must say, from the minute I stepped foot here, it really struck me at how much effort goes into keeping us apart. And so I think that the fact that we get to this brinkmanship, especially when it comes to funding our government, is really the illness. And so I think it's something that we're going to have to continue to work on. And I must say that I'm proud of the effort that we've made with the Problem Solvers Caucus to keep pushing. And really, we were rank and file members who came to the table to continue to push for this package. And I'm hopeful under President-elect Biden that this type of brinkmanship and this ultra divisiveness is going to change, and we're going to see a new period of trying to cooperate and compromise and work together. Now, when you compromise, obviously, not everyone's going to be 100% happy with the product, but ultimately that's what gets the job done.
We put that entire interview on 8newsnow.com. Our Washington, D.C. Bureau correspondent Alexandra Limon has stayed on top of these relief package negotiations. I asked her about what we can all expect now.
Lawmakers say they are once again on the brink of a COVID-19 relief deal. Our Washington correspondent Alexandra Limon has more on that. Alex, why has this process been so drawn out?
There were a few different issues that were holding up the negotiations, but one of the biggest things was the unemployment benefits. We know that Democrats have been pushing for a long time to both extend and increase the amount of federal unemployment benefits that people get. But for a long time, Republicans were really trying to push back on that. In fact, some Republicans didn't want any additional unemployment benefits at all. But in the end, they did agree to some extension. It was for a shorter time than Democrats wanted and also for less money. And instead, at the very last minute, what they said, instead of doing these longer and larger unemployment benefits, what they wanted to do, Republicans, was send out another round of those one-time stimulus checks to Americans. This came up at the very last minute because for, weeks now, these negotiations have been going on and they didn't include stimulus checks. And that caught some Democrats off guard. In fact, Senator Mark Warner of Virginia said, he was pretty upset about it. He said it didn't make sense to send money to Americans who are employed rather than sending more money to people who lost their jobs, who may be on the brink of losing their homes, and who maybe don't even have, the money to feed their families. And so that was one of the issues that really held up negotiations at the very end. And that's in addition to the things that have been ongoing, like whether or not to provide more money to state and local governments.
Where do you expect this will go now?
So lawmakers are now saying they do expect to be able to reach a deal by this weekend. Initially, the deadline was Friday, but now they're talking about extending the budget, for 1 or 2 days worth of funding so that they can hold that larger budget deal and tie the stimulus package to it and pass it then. So it is possible that we could see that happen this weekend. Despite these last minute disagreements, they say they are still hopeful that can happen.
That was Alexandra Limon from our Washington, D.C. bureau. From the revival of the film tax credit to public records laws and what kids learn in school, we'll take you through some of the bills being written for our 2021 legislative session.
The Valley's news leader.
The 2021 legislative session begins in February, and we are approaching 900 bill draft requests already on a wide variety of subjects. Nearly 200 of them have been written. So this week, we want to highlight some of those in the Assembly.
Assembly Bill 10 would double the criminal penalties for vehicular manslaughter. Right now, it's a maximum of 6 months and a $1,000 fine. It would go up to 364 days and a $2,000 fine. It is sponsored by the Judiciary Committee. Assembly Bill 20 would revive the film tax credit for companies that shoot movies in Nevada. The film tax credit was initially the baby of now Attorney General Aaron Ford when he was the Senate Majority Leader in 2013. It was initially $80 million in transferable credits. The legislature gutted it to $10 million a year later and gave the rest to Tesla during a special session. It was brought back again in 2017 but became part of the education budget deal in 2019. The latest version is sponsored by the Committee on Revenue. AB 39 would hide more records from the public. It would make notes and working papers that are deemed for personal use not applicable to public records requests. That is from the Committee on Government Affairs. AB 56 would require high school students to take a class on the Holocaust or the history of genocides. This one is from the Education Committee. And Assembly Bill 60 targets non-disclosure agreements. It voids any part of a contract or agreement that requires someone to not testify in court about criminal conduct or sexual harassment. That one is from the Judiciary Committee.
The 2021 legislature starts on February 1st in Carson City. They have not yet said what kind of COVID precautions will be in place.
First month's payment and 0 to its signing.
Here's what we're keeping an eye on next week in What to Watch. On Monday, Clark County is holding a virtual town hall on the eviction moratorium and rental assistance. It's meant to help both those facing eviction and landlords who are not receiving their normal rent. Thanks for watching Politics Now.